Hi, everyone, and welcome to our presentation. You can go on to the next slide. Our presentation is going to be about creating a space for positive youth development and youth-driven leadership. You can go on to the next slide. You skipped one. I'll be the first to introduce myself. My name is Deja, and I am part of the YAB in Dane County, which is the Youth Action Board. Go on, Ari.
Sorry, everybody. I'll show my face in just a second, but I'm Ari. I'm also a part of the Youth Action Board in Dane County. Pronoun he, him.
Hey y'all, my name is Tiffany. I use she, they pronouns, and I'm a senior program officer at True Colors United. And I get the honor of working with these Youth Action Board members and others across the country.
You can go on to the next slide. First, we're going to start off with just some simple introductions. If you guys wouldn't mind dropping your name and your pronouns in the chat, along with the community that you're from. And identities you would like to welcome into the space, and also what authentic collaboration is to you, or what it means to you.
We got people from Florida, California, Chicago, Kansas, Abilene, Texas. Hey, I've been there.
I see some more Wisconsin and Georgia, Orlando, North Carolina,
Iowa, Las Vegas, New York.
Got people from all over. Wow, this is amazing.
And I'm seeing somebody answer in the chat, Deja. Oh, it's going so fast. For them, what makes collaboration authentic is making people heard and validated.
I also see another one that says it means uplifting voices.
Well, here's another good one. Truly actionably following the direction and leadership of youth while making sure respect is clear in youth spaces to each other and from older adults. Sounds like you're a pro at this, Kiana.
Ooh, someone said, Shabrina, I hope I'm saying that right. It says authentic collaboration is no gimmicks, just genuine validation and connection. I love that.
Got another one. Collaboration authentic is being open and honest to others' point of view, working with them to come to a new viewpoint.
Ooh, Jessica, what makes authentic collaboration? Ooh, sorry, missed it. What makes authentic collaboration is making sure we not only hear but listen to those who have lived experience to educate those who do not, and working together to better the community, being connected and not divided.
I feel like that sums up everything we're going to talk about today, right there. What do you think, Deja and Ari?
Yeah, I think that like very much hit it right on the ball, and we'll get a little bit more, well, a lot more into that over the next hour or so.
Cool. We can go to the next slide, I think. So pronouns, why are pronouns important and why are we asking for folks to share their pronouns? Because everyone has pronouns. Naming pronouns reminds us that we cannot know and should never assume when we know someone's gender just from knowing their name, seeing their face or body, or hearing their voice. Naming pronouns during introduction really gives everyone the opportunity to be actively involved and consent on how they want others in the room to refer to them. By hearing and using pronouns that people ask us to use, we're respecting everyone's identity. And pronouns may change over time for many reasons. So naming pronouns in introduction gives people the opportunity to name who they are and how they want to be referred to in that moment. And some people may use different pronouns in different settings, right? So depending on where they feel safe and safety in that space, they may use different pronouns. So really asking folks what their pronouns are in the space is important. Next slide, please. So for folks who don't know what pronouns are, these are some common pronouns. Everybody has them. Everybody in the world has pronouns. They could be she, her, hers, he, him, his, they, them, theirs, Zer. They may be mixed, like mine are, she, they. And it seems very small, but pronouns can actually really have a very large impact on somebody feeling respected and honored and valued in the space as who they are. Next slide, please. So these are some quick terms that we want to share with you all kind of for level setting today on creating collaborative spaces. We want this to be a collaborative space with you all today as well. But these are some things that we use when we're talking with young people and groups of young people mixed with older adult partners. You want your space to be inclusive. That means being very welcoming of diverse identities, acknowledging that there is definitely going to be an impact on acknowledging the impact of heterosexism, racism, cisgenderism, ableism, you name it. So really making sure we're addressing those in the spaces that we're in to make sure that it can be as inclusive as possible. You really want the space to be affirming, so centering the lived experience of all people and actively honoring different identities. So lived expertise is just as important, if not more, than someone with a degree. So really making sure the folks that have lived expertise that you're bringing into your spaces feel that affirmation, they feel that power, and they stand in that power. Creating a collaborative space means creating a safe space. So it's a space that you want to build trust and respect, where people feel comfortable to be their authentic selves, free of judgment. And you want it to be really supportive. So you want it to be an environment that encouraged people to be their true selves without paternalism, right? So not being that overarching parent trying to be like mama bear, keeping it safe, but really making sure that it's a supportive space for people to be who they truly are and stand in their identity. I'm going to pass it over to Ari for the next slide.
All right, I told you I was going to show my face eventually. Again, hey, I'm Ari. I'm going over the Zoom norms that we have. So we ask that you mute yourself when you are not asking questions or presenting. Camera use, as you know, is optional. You'll see me pop mine on and off throughout the presentation. Monitor how you use the chat. Make sure that we are being kind and respectful. You know, if you have questions, that is good to have in the chat, but we also will have time for people to put things in the chat later on. You can use the reactions as features to show love. If you're to step away, there's also an emoji reaction for that. And then again, we do have predetermined conversation activities, so just try your best to hold your questions till the very end. Does someone go to slide 8? So we have 5 learning targets we're hoping you get out of this today. 1, we hope to give you real life examples of how positive youth development can be brought into a space. To ensure youth and young adult leadership and build permanent connections. 2, we are helping older adult partners to understand authentic youth collaboration, adultism, and how to be true partners and collaborators with youth and young adults. 3, we're also helping older adult partners address their own adultism and how to make space for youth and young adult leadership and power sharing. We are 4, creating advancement employment opportunities that reduce barriers for youth and young adults, build on skills and desired learning that increases the 4 outcomes: permanent connections, physical and social, emotional well-being, education and employment, and safe and stable housing. And then 5, we are creating positions of leadership to uplift youth and young adult voice and empower them to step into their decision-making power. I'm going to pass it on to Deja for slide number 9.
With that being said, we now have all of our learning targets and we have what our Zorb norms will look like. So we're going to move on to our first, business call, I guess, which is positive youth development. You can go on to the next slide. We're going to just ask how many people are familiar with positive youth development framework. If you could drop a heart in the chat or a thumbs up if you have a general idea, and put a wow if you don't really like know anything, but you kind of know a bit about it.
See lots of hearts and thumbs up.
I was gonna say that I see a lot of hearts and thumbs up. That's amazing.
Got some wows. Thanks for being here.
Yes, loving it. Okay, can't wait to teach you guys a little bit more about it. If you want to go on to the next slide for me. So, positive youth development, also known as PYD, is framework for approaching youth and the services offered to them. PYD focuses on identifying and developing youth sorry, I can't speak, and assets rather than concentrating on the risks and deficits. Kind of meaning like going on to the next slide. Well, I guess Tiffany will kind of explain a bit more for us.
Yeah, thanks, Deja. So positive youth development is the entire system of support. So it could be school, home, community that builds upon the strengths of youth and recognizes potential risky behavior that they may exhibit. So positive youth development really involves youth as active agents, and adults and youth work in partnership. So it's really a collaboration in a team. Civic involvement is a big component of positive youth development and works best when every element of the community is involved. So the reason we're talking to you all about positive youth development, I met Ari and Deja through the Youth Homeless Demonstration Program, YHDP. And positive youth development is one of the tenets of that project that is funded by HUD. So they talk about, so this is a government framework that was created, but they talk about connection is really important, confidence. So like, how are you building young people's self-worth? How are you believing in them so that they have the capacity to succeed? Character, so teaching young people, young adults how take responsibility. What does a sense of independence and individuality look like? Caring, so what does it look like to have sympathy and empathy for others? Commitment to social justice. Contribution, so how are young people, wherever you are, contributing to the design of your system, the design of your program or your project? How are they adding in to whatever it is that you're creating? And then competence, the ability to act efficiently or effectively in school, social situations, and work. So all of these things kind of, for me, when we're talking about positive youth development, really remind me of what it looks like to be authentic collaborators with young people, right? How are we returning the power back to young people who are most impacted by our systems and by processes and homelessness, to really have the power, to stand in their power, to tell us what they need, what they want the system to look like. And so, yeah, I'm going to turn it back over to Ari to talk to us a little bit more about what positive youth development looks like.
All right, just letting you know you're gonna get some music. The school I work at, my office is like in the gym in a sense. Could someone turn the slide to page 13? So there are two types of approaches to positive youth development. There's a deficit-based approach, which focuses narrowly on like the youth problems, teen pregnancy, delinquency, things like that. And then we have the positive youth-based approach, which focuses on community systems, programs that embrace positive development, and really focus on like the strengths and looking forward and protective and preventative, and also providing empowering things, right? May someone turn the slide, please? So positive youth align community systems and programs. They demonstrate intentional and pro-social approach to working with youth. They recognize and utilize enhanced strengths. Hold on one second. They help youth overcome adversity so they can thrive and flourish. They also provide opportunities for youth to develop resiliencies and things like, skills, right? And while doing that, you can nurture positive relationships with adults and peers. We do a lot of that in our YAB. We have a lot of adult partners, and even ourselves, right? And then they also help productively and constructively engage with communities, schools, and organizations. When you are in this work, it is not a one-person show. It definitely takes like a village of people to make sure things are going well and hold each other accountable, and to build new and innovative ideas. And then also, lastly, it supports youth to develop and enhance leadership skills. Yes, everybody has their own form of leadership, but it also, when you get into work like this, it lets you take ownership as a youth, and it allows you to find other skills that contribute to how you lead in your community.
Ari, could you share an example of like leadership stuff that you all in the Madison YAB have, like a way that you've done this?
Yeah, one of our ways is we held a procurement process with our YHDP funds. And so how we led was, we realized that our community needed something that was totally different than what our older adult partner organizations are offering. So we ended up we had did something that was not really known. And we took our funds and we just like took a step back, and we built the projects based off our community needs and youth input. And it took a lot of advocating, a lot of fighting. It took a lot of going to board meetings and city meetings and talking to a lot of people who felt that they didn't really understand the term adultism, but they had a lot of internalized adultism, even when they say things like, we're here to support you, right? It took a lot of advocating. It took a lot of, standing our own ground, to make sure that we were not silenced and that the youth and young adults in our community got the things that they needed, even if it was untraditional, right? We took a lot of leadership in hiring our YHCP coordinator and our YAB coordinator, and even right now, building budgets to support our projects that we're hoping to start in the upcoming 2023. May someone turn to slide 15? All right. So input and feedback from youth and young adults. So set youth and young adult leaders up for success. Before asking for input or feedback, it's essential to collaborate on tools and training. Please consider like a list of acronyms for your local, state, and federal agencies. Remember, I told you earlier, leadership is instilled in a lot of people, but there's a lot of things in governments and systems and projects and programs like acronyms and ways of working that you just don't know, right? And it's really important that our older adult partners take time to like coach and really collaborate with youth and young adults to make sure they understand those things. Number 2, create a collaborative environment for input and feedback. Sorry, I'm just reading the same slides, y'all. I just need to see it bigger. Give various options for youth and young adults leaders to give their input. I use this term called gatekeeping. People try to find one particular way to like manage something, and it's inequitable, right? So having different ways to collect feedback, whether it's through email, in-person polling, a text, whatever, a paper form, listening sessions, all that, right? Be open to printing and distributing materials for written responses to emails with attachments, even working together on a shared document or shared drive. Make sure we are setting deadlines, set clear and realistic deadlines. Be mindful that youth work and young adults have personal lives outside of this work. That's just self-explanatory, right? everybody has a personal life, everybody has a work life, right? It's really important that we remember that we just keep that in consideration, that, you know, not everybody's watching an email 24/7, 365. It might be a set time. Like when I check emails for my YAB, I check it 2 times a day. Where my work email, I'll check a few more times a day, right? But number 4, uplift the impact of the work. Make sure you give clear examples of how youth and young adults input and feedback are influential to the work that you are doing. Often, for example, Tiffany is our technical assistance provider in Madison. So Tiffany is really good at making sure that they give really good examples of how we, what she likes to call, stepped into our power, or like advocated for ourselves and really did something. And it makes an impact. And hearing from someone who has experience in the field, it makes us, one, say, okay, we are doing something right, right? Even as a team, like, we know that we do good work. It's just nice to hear from someone else, right? It also allows us to actually trust Tiffany to say, oh, you really are seeing the work that we're doing, and you're really seeing how, you know, what amount of effort it takes for people who, you know, have lived experience and some who don't. I'm going to pass it back to Deja for slide 16.
I know you guys have heard a lot of us talking, so now we are going to invite you guys to come off of mute and just kind of say what you guys, well, what youth collaboration looks like to you. Is there anyone that would like to come off and say something?
So with Friends, we like to make sure that all of our programming, from the time that they come in to the time they leave, that they have the input in what type of programming is provided to them, like what types of groups, you know, what's a healthy meal when it comes to mealtime and those kinds of things. So we do their input on everything within our programming.
I love that. I also see that Melissa said we are youth decided and adult guided. I love that because it kind of gives the impression that youth are allowed to speak what they want to speak, but also that the adults are kind of just there to help them and not take over. I love that. Youth voice and youth choice. Nice. Anyone else? Nice, Melissa. Who better to tell us what they need other than the youth themselves? That is amazing. That is why we over here we normally say for youth by youth. That's kind of our little saying. I guess we can go on to the next slide if no one else has anything else that they'd like to say.
All right, everybody. So authentic youth partnership with youth young adults. Please be intentional about your decision making and power. Your decision making power that youth have in your work. Youth are the experts in their truth. Also, when asking young people to be involved in your work, hear them out, you know, and then build a really good relationship, a reciprocal relationship, and make sure, you know, you're honoring their experiences and allowing their experiences and ideas to inform the process. Authentic youth collaboration should also include emotional support and connection. Make sure that you're asking questions such as in what ways do you wish youth directly impact decisions in the organization? In what ways are youth being a part of generating solutions? And how are youth in my organization benefiting the value of their lived experience? This can keep you accountable to the young people that you're working with. And as an older adult partner, it is your responsibility not to speak for a young person, but rather elevate their voice and make sure that they are feeling empowered. I am going to, and then we're on to the next slide.
All right, so guys, into our introduction into adultism. So if you don't know what adultism is, adultism describes the systems of privileged attitudes and behaviors that adults have over those of young people. Adultism is driven by behaviors and attitudes that are based on the assumption that adults are better than young people and therefore entitles them to act upon or on behalf of young people without their agreement. So like in Dane County, if like throughout our whole process, us stopping our partner procurement plan, say that the adults like took that over and basically was like, no, like you guys aren't allowed to do this, even though you guys are running the project. We feel as if this doesn't need to be stopped and that we need to continue with it, but the young adults feel like we should stop. That's kind of adultism, where the adults are implementing what they think and what they think, kind of assuming what they think is better than what the young adults have to offer. And we're going to go into adultism with that on the next slide.
Hey, everybody. So the question right now we have is, what is ageism, right? Ageism is a stereotyping and discriminating against people on the basis of age. Now, a lot of you may probably sit here wondering what is adultism and ageism and how they're different. Ageism describes the systems of privileged attitudes and behaviors that younger people have over elders. And one thing I want to add to that is, you honestly really, people don't notice that they like internalize adultism and ageism until you start to understand what they both are and how you know how it affects your daily working, or even as like a parent, an aunt, an uncle, a grandparent, or any person that works with youth. Maybe turn to slide 20.
Here we just have a couple examples of some common language used in adultism, such as respect your elders. I know that's one that's been around for generations. Yeah, the older the wiser, childish, or you're immature. You're too young, or you're not old enough to be a part of this conversation or what we're doing. Melissa, yes, when I was your age, that is a great one. Children should be seen, not heard. That's a very big one that is very prompt in a lot of families. Stay in a child's place. The more you live, the more you know. You're acting too grown. That is a very, very common thing around everyone, whether it's you being a teenager talking to an adult, or you being a 19-year-old talking to a 30-year-old. You're acting too grown because you're not acting the age that they think that you're supposed to be. Yeah. And I'm going to hand it over to Symphony and cycle us into oppression.
Thanks, Deja. Go to the next slide. So what adultism is a type of oppression, right? And so we're going to kind of talk through quickly, what are the different cycles of oppression and why are they important to this work? Because they are all super important. So the first type of oppression is that ideological oppression. This is the big idea behind oppression. This is the big idea, and the big idea is supremacy. That one group of people or one way of being is inherently superior. So some examples of this include adultism, patriarchy, white supremacies. This layer or cycle of oppression creates the isms like sexism, racism, ableism, etc. The second piece, institutional oppression, these are like the societal systems, the laws and the policies. So these would be your program law policies that you have internally to your organization. When these are informed by any kind of supremacy, they reinforce the isms and are inherently oppressive. So you really have to think like, how can we take a step back as an organization to ensure that we have young people of all different race, gender, belief systems, ability levels, etc., helping us determine and create our policies internally to our programs. Because if you don't bring young people to the table to help you create those together as collaborators, guaranteed there's going to be oppression within those different things. And then this third one here, interpersonal. So this involves people inside of institution who are following the policies and procedures of their institution, which are informed by supremacy. So when those policies and procedures are oppressive, the interactions between people at the institution will also likely be oppressive, right? And you may not even be aware of it because you don't know. You're like, this is a rule or a policy that was created. And oftentimes we don't take the time to spend to unpack, like, where did this policy come from? Who created this policy? Who was a part of making this policy, right? And so that's what we're talking about today, is like, to be really truly authentic to youth collaboration, it's how do we step back as older adult partners and really look at things from a new lens with young people in mind, right? At the table, reviewing our policies. It could be things like, which we'll talk about later, like cell phone policies, like no cell phones in transitional living programs, or different things like that, that we as adult partners think are good or needed for young people, or we're keeping others safe. But in reality, you're creating oppressive environments. And then there's that fourth piece, which is internalized. So this is the final part of oppression in this cycle of oppression. And in each interaction, there is an individual. That individual will then internalize their experiences with people within the institutions, which are informed by supremacy. So this informs how the person understands themselves and processes their own experiences. Internalized adultism, we often see in youth and young adults that have engaged in adultist system. So internalized oppression, that's where you're going to see young people when they're struggling with the adultism that's existing or the different things that are existing in the community. Go to the next slide. So we just learned about these different types of oppression and the cycle of oppression, right? It all kind of feeds into each other and around. So some adultist kind of things that you can hear, and Deja, and I'm sure Ari can relate to this, I'm going to use transitional housing instead of rapid rehousing. Transitional housing doesn't work for youth. That is something that they're hearing currently in their community from older adult partners. Or before you can have housing, we need to know that you're going to be responsible and do X, Y, Z. Or internalized would be, I'm not mature enough for my own house, right? Those beliefs and thoughts came from somewhere. So how do we as older adult partners help young people to unpack this, to see that they really do hold a lot of power and they should be leading and designing these programs, these projects, and these things that you're creating. And so we know young people are systemically mistreated and undervalued simply for being young, right? And so understanding and acknowledging systemic oppression really enables us to address those inequities. You go to the next slide, please. So the ways that young people are invited to participate are really important. And it's really up to you all as older adult partners working with them to be intentional, communicative, and aware as these partnerships are formed. So historically, youth experiencing homelessness may have been taken advantage of, tokenized in multiple ways, even by organizations and practices intending to support them. One of these ways is what we call trauma porn. So youth are often asked to share their stories on panels, in the media, or at fundraising events. Though these are well-intentioned, these kind of opportunities really are limiting. It really rarely includes the young person's ideas for impacting change, and the young person can be re-traumatized by these experiences, particularly when the value of their lived experience is profited from without an exchange of information or services. Authentic youth collaboration really is about more than inviting a young person to share their stories of their past. It's also about providing them the space for them to share their vision for the future. Authentic youth collaborations is sometimes and often hindered by adultism, right? This happens when youth and young people are presumed to lack knowledge or experience because of their age, and their ideas are dismissed. They're dealing with this in Madison right now, right? Like, the young people decided, we want transitional housing. We don't have a shelter for young people. We know this is what's going to work. And they're hearing from their older adult partners, it's going to fail. It's not going to work. We can't do that. Like, that is adultism, like, perfectly clear. And so it's really important that when we engage young people, that we're engaging them authentically and effectively, and that requires us to flip this idea on its head, right? And so one example of this is through language. So consider the times that you've heard the phrase, they're just kids, Somebody is off mute. If you could mute yourself, that would be great. There-
Don't know that part.
Hey, Lisa, you keep going off and on mute. There we go. Thanks.
Steak or
So-
pulled pork, because I'm kind of
Hey,
chickened out and ready to lay.
Hey, Lisa. Thanks. So referring to young people as kids can sometimes be really dismissive and undermine the knowledge of an experience that a young person brings, right? I think Deja and Ari are perfect examples of this. Like, they are young people, but they are brilliant. They have so many ideas. They're visionaries. They're radically changing what homelessness looks like in Madison and nationally, right? Like, they're leading innovation and change like no other YAB that I've ever worked with, right? So just really thinking about the term kids really does inherently diminish the experience of a person rather than to referring to someone as a young adult or a young person, which that sets a very different tone. You can go to the next slide. So some ways to identify and refrain adultism. This is how you as adult partners can show up and be co-conspirators in the work with young people, right? So like many isms or systemic oppression, adultism is learned early in life. And although it's all around, it's often invisible until it's pointed out. I think we experienced this in Madison until I was like, hey, I think that's adultist. And the young people were like, oh, you're right, that is adultist, the way that they're treating us or acting. And so it really takes you as an older adult partner to show up and be able to question like, oh, where's this coming from? Is this an adultist thought, right? Because we know that learned ideas and behaviors of adultism come with really harmful effects, including creating and perpetuating divisive power imbalances in collaboration between young people and adult partners. So it takes unlearning, it takes a commitment, right? It takes replacing it with new attitudes. Like, no, young people who have experienced homelessness, they know their experience better and they know what they need better. Language is super important. Replacing it with new attitudes, take action against oppression, speak up, call it out, right? Invite people into those hard conversations, get in the mud together, right? That is how you're going to create a better, more equitable process and system that young people are going to want to engage in, right? And remember that we've all been the oppressed, the oppressor, and the ally, myself included, right? And so thinking and putting ourselves in those shoes of like, what does it feel like in this moment if I'm like purposely oppressing someone else? We don't usually think that thought, right? And so we have to really take a step back in every situation and figure out how can we show up better so that young people feel the power that they hold. On that, I'm going to turn it back over to you, Deja, to lead us to the next slide.
Thank you so much, Tiffany. Next is another interactive slide. When adultism shows up in our work, we need to come up with a plan to reframe adultism and understand that youth and young adults should not be responsible for calling it out. Meaning we would love our adult partners to start to maybe call out some of the adultism that you see, so it's not like our young adults are attacking our older adult partners. As a group, let's identify when you've seen it show up in the work. Have you called it out? If you have called it out, what commitment can we make today to call it out and reframe it as it shows up in our work? I'd say something as simple as maybe just making it aware that adultism and ageism is a thing. A lot of people simply just don't know that there is a word for it.
Yeah, I think just, when I work with coordinated entry, so I also take calls for adults who are homeless as well. And so, when I talk to my team about, you would work with a youth, like a client youth, the same you'd work as an adult youth. They're asking for the same things. And so just really like not putting an emphasis on like how to change depending on if it's a youth or not, because they're wanting to be housed. That's all that we want to help with. And so just looking at like, we shouldn't, they shouldn't be shamed, we shouldn't, anything like that. And so just really working towards just collaborating in a way that treating youth as we treat adults in the same situation.
That is amazing. I love that. It was very nice to hear from you, Anna, or Anna. I hope I'm saying that okay. I am seeing
Yeah, it's Anna.
okay, Anna. I am also seeing some comments in the chat. There's quite a bit going on there. I see Melissa says working with community partners to educate them on it, on the youth and young adult perspective, use of language, effective tools. People don't know what they don't know. And that's exactly what I was saying. Some people don't even know that ageism or adultism is a actual thing.
I work for a transitional living program, and something that I've noticed often in my work is when we have youth that are demonstrating troubling behaviors, maybe these are things that put the youth at risk or put other people at risk. I find that oftentimes our first reaction is to deal with the behavior without taking the time to talk to the youth about what's actually going on. And I guess it's connected to adultism. Just because we often think, oh, this is a problem and this is why, so just go ahead and fix it, is sort of sometimes often the approach we take. And I always try to encourage my staff to slow the conversation down a little bit and really start from a place of trying to understand before immediately jumping to this is what you should be doing. And I feel like those conversations are so much more valuable because we get to really get some insight into their thought process, into how they're coping with their trauma. Most of the time, what looks like a problem behavior is actually just the youth asking for help. And if we take the right approach, we can get there.
Yeah. Oh, for me, I'm sorry, Deja.
No, go ahead.
So for me, in my experience, I worked at a treatment facility for youth that were their DCFS youth, and then they're opening a homeless shelter pretty soon. And what I've noticed is like people that tend to be more seasoned in the role exclude the youth in conversations about their treatment, and forget that they're like they know what they're saying and what they need and what they're doing, and they actually do have an idea of what's better for them. Not necessarily, we're not like looking for what's best, but what's better, so that they can continue to grow. And so one way to like that I've practiced and I've learned how to interrupt it is like allowing the adult to finish, and then like bringing in the youth, like what's your opinion, and like reminding them that this is their space and like the space is being held for them, and it's not like something that's like against them or like to control them, and like remembering that yeah, just we're not here to control them. And I'll end there. Thank you for letting me share.
Yes, I love that. You're kind of like redirecting all of the attention back on the youth, even after hearing what the adult has to say. I love that so much.
Hey, one thing that we found successful here with us is we ask our Youth Action Council to help us frame policy and procedure, drop in rules, outreach engagement. We have come to the philosophy that nobody can tell us better than the youth what they want. For instance, when I'm thirsty, you can't tell me I'm thirsty. Only I can tell me that I am thirsty. You know what I mean? And so if I listen to the youth, it helps me to run my drop-in center better. It helps me to run my rapid housing programs better. It helps me to run the shelters better. You know what I mean? It helps when you have proper input from the very people that you serve. For me, that's probably the most important thing when I find that when listening to our young people, is that they often feel that they're not being heard. And even when they are asked a question, their words aren't being put into practice. So we worked really hard to make sure that they are represented, because representation matters, and I encourage everyone to do the same. I was skeptical at first when we started to change our approach a couple of years ago. But as we've gone about this, it has become very, very clear that our youth have a very good idea of how to help themselves. They just don't have the resources to get it, and that's where we come in.
Yes, thank you so much. That was a great example, and I love that you are advocating for us. I love that so much. And with all of that, we're going to go on to the next slide and give it to Ari.
Hey everybody, back with me. So ways that we can fight adultism. You can fight adultism multiple ways. One, by making people aware of it. Another way you can do is making sure that making sure that you have always opportunities for authentic youth collaboration. A third way is interrupting spaces where adultism is present. Because adultism can make a lot of people feel uncomfortable, especially youth and young adults such as myself. And it can either put you in this like, I'm ready to come for you mode, and like, I'm ready to let you know, like, here's the truth. Or it can put you in a spot where like you're paused, right? Okay. And then lastly, understanding and incorporating intersectionality in your systems. This is really important for the work to end youth homelessness, because people from all types of identities has the possibility of becoming homelessness. And it's just one way to end it or prevent it, right? Are there any questions? Okay. All right, we're gonna go over to avoiding barriers with Deja.
All right, next up, if you could change the slide, yeah, thanks. Avoiding barriers to authentic youth collaboration. You can go on to the next slide as well. First, we're just going to start with compensation. Compensating youth and young adults for their time and effort is essential. It kind of makes them feel like they're worth something. Make sure they're being paid in ways that make sense for them, whether that's a gift card or a $20 check or something like that. Compensating youth and young adults at a livable wage is critical in this work, especially if they're doing things constantly like we are. We're part-time, so we get about 15 hours a week, which is really good for us. Involving youth and young adults in grant writing and prospecting, being transparent early and often, always actively identifying new funding sources. And pizza and food is not compensation. I'm sorry, but that's not something that I can live off of. Therefore, it's not like really something that counts as like, you can't pay me with pizza. Thanks, Rihanna's our girl over here. You can go on to the next slide.
Everybody. So building trust. When you're building trust, remember it's important to, in any effective working relationship, that you need to have established trust, right? Once you have established trust, the true work can start, the true collaboration can start between youth, young adults, and older adult partners. When you're building trust, please consider how any of your intake processes look, and how that may impact the development of trust. Also, be okay with being called in and out. This is, again, a work in progress. There's no real written handbook to it all. So it's nice to just say, okay, this is something that's wrong. They called me on it. What do I do to move next? Or being called in and say, hey, I need help here. Can you help me? If you offer to be there, then you should hold true to your promise. And then lastly, move at the speed of trust, and everything can happen like McDonald's or Burger King. It sometimes it moves like a Olive Garden or a Red Lobster. So you just gotta, go with the flow of trust and equity and let it, let it be. I'm gonna turn the slide deck over to Tiffany. And can we just turn that slide to 20, or I think it's 30?
Thanks, Ari. The other thing you really want to consider or a barrier, something that could become a barrier, is meaningful engagement. This is an issue that often gets in the way of effective collaboration between youth and service providers, specifically showing engagement. So like if you're just bringing a young person to a meeting to say that you had a young person in that space, that's tokenism. That's showing engagement. That's not what we're talking about. We want to make sure that young people are being brought into the space to really engage, to give their ideas, their expertise, keyword on expertise, right? We don't want to just create this impression of inclusion and diversity if we're not actually going to make changes based on what the young people are telling us, what they're sharing, right? And this graphic here is from the Creative Reaction Lab. They have this process called equity-centered community design. I highly recommend you all look into it. And when we're talking about meaningfully engaging, part of that is like addressing the history of harm, right? That has been caused in the community that maybe young people have experienced. Maybe they don't trust you. They don't want to come to that table because they know that they've been burnt by you in the past, right? So how can we work towards addressing that, the history that they've had, and start the healing process? And then it talks about like acknowledging and dismantling power constructs, right? That's a big one. Older adult partners often, they do not want to share their power. Some of them are on ego trips, which is crazy to say in the work of homelessness, but it's true. So how can we work to like dismantle those power constructs and make sure that there's more equitable power sharing and decision making? And I'm not going to go through all the steps, but meaningful engagement is super important when it comes to engaging young people in this work. And I'm going to pass it back over to Deja to talk about power.
Youth and young adults need to know that they have power. This should be backed up or reinforced by our systems. We should ensure that youth serving systems are informed by the youth and young adults by reserving space for youth and young adults to have voting, hiring, and decision-making power. Like on some of our boards, there should be a seat open for one of our youth action board members, maybe, or one of our youth just around, just so they can give that input that really no other partner can give. And with that being said, I'm going to pass it back to Ari.
You can go to the next slide. I'm gonna jump in for Ari. Oh, there he is.
Sorry.
Right.
No, it just takes me a while to get to that unmute button. So things to look out for. Make sure your introductions are equitable and include pronouns. I know that's it's a new thing, right? Especially for me, who I lead a lot of meetings. I've had to adapt them to like including pronouns, so that way I can know how to address people. Establish working agreements. Sometimes working rules of order does not. It's not the move, right? Coming together, I even have this thing called the full value contract in my team, where it has questions that target for like our mission, and then my team answers them together, so that way we can all establish how we show up for one another and how we collaborate in our work. A collaborative curriculum of how you move and teach and learn and support your community. Make sure your thank yous are genuine. When I give a thank you, I like to give the reason why I'm saying things. I just like, oh, thanks for that, right? Like I do like little shout out things like this with my teammates. And I say, oh, thank you for, supporting me during that really rough day on Wednesday or whatever. Peer empowerment, it's really nice to encourage that. Like, if Deja, right? Well, a lot of our team, I've learned, they've taught me a lot about how you just like genuinely go, oh, thanks for that. You're really good at that. And I really appreciate that. Or like, let's do this together. And we will literally step out and do things together. Sharing skills. Again, not just hoarding the skill and saying, oh, you're not good at this, I'm just do it and don't worry about it. But just, make sure treat every opportunity as like a learning moment, right? And then how you're like checking on people and like tightening loose ends and making sure, systems are followed so that way your community can get the best product of, whatever projects are going on or however your programs are operating in your community. I am passing on, I think I'm passing on to Tiffany. I might be right.
Yeah. Go to the next slide, please. So we're going to jump in here a little bit on collaboration on services, and Deja's going to talk us through what this looks like. Next slide.
Hi again. In order to collaborate with youth to participate in your programs and services, it is important to honor their anatomy to make important decisions that impact their lives. So, for example, a service provider could use an intake form to educate young people about different available housing or supportive services options rather than making them the choice for them. So I know in quite a few, places, when you come in looking for housing, they kind of don't give you the option to look at the housing that you want. They kind of just pick for you. And we want to try to make it an option that they just kind of give you a list of what the available ones are and what you think would be the best fit for you, just so it can make it more comfortable and make it seem as if we're not there to just push them into what we want them to do, but what they also want to do as well. And I'm going to give it back to Ari.
Sorry about that. So now I just can we turn the slide, please? I'm sorry. So here's the question. What kind of support do youth and young adults need in this work? You can come off mute and do this. You could do it in the chat.
I think one of the things that is missing all too frequently is those of us that have been in the field for a while, stepping up and really like mentoring youth. Like we have a youth advisory board. So really bringing those youth with us and mentoring and supporting them and having them like at the seat at the table, not as somebody that's just in it, like you said, as a token, but someone that's really there and they're actually doing the work, but they have the support of that administration behind them. So they don't feel abandoned or they don't feel like they're not being heard. And then it really is, I think, our role as directors and administrators to support those expectations that a lot of these young adults are bringing, because they really do know what's best.
Okay. Thank you. That was really good. I'm sorry, there's a lot of people on the chat as well. Guidance, life skills, for people to actually listen to youth, learn, not listening. Okay, I'm loving some of these responses.
We're just going to go on to the next slide and add it into our conversation because the next slide is revolving around the conversation.
Yeah, so thanks, Deja. So, and Ari. So these are some more things that young people have said that they need, right? Authentic partnerships. So commitment to undoing adultism in your community, creating equitable relationships, talking about power sharing. How do you share power? What does that look like? Some tools and training, which I'm seeing in the chat as well. Some like soft and hard skills, professional development and investment, mentoring and coaching support, right? Especially if you're engaging young people in the work at this level, is like, what can you do that will benefit them? What do they want as a benefit, right? We don't want just them providing their expertise to benefit you. It should be a reciprocal relationship. Clarity of roles and responsibilities is huge. So explaining, what are they about to get into? What is this meeting going to be about? What kind of guidance can you give them when they're in that space, or description of what's happened in that space? How do you make them feel really welcome and included and empowered in that space? And then knowing what they're walking into, right? Sitting down with folks and understanding like what's the local landscape, what kind of system knowledge do they need in order to feel like they're empowered to engage in this space? How can you as older adult partners be liberated gatekeepers of information? You all hold information, right? How can you share that information so that young people feel empowered to make the best decisions that they can? And how are we not just preparing young people before they come into the meeting, but how are we preparing older adult partners in the meeting space to make that space more accessible, right? So that the young person doesn't have to fit into that space, but the space is like we said earlier, it's equitable, it's inclusive of everyone. And I think we're going to turn it over to Deja. She's going to walk us through, we have 2 activities, identify and reframe, but she's actually going to walk us through one of them because we're short on time. You can go to scenario 2, please. Thanks.
All right, and this is going to be another one where we're going to ask you to drop some things in the chat or just come off mute and, you know, help us out a little bit. A transitional housing program has a policy that prohibits participants from bringing their phone into the space, meaning that when they enter the building, they have to maybe put their phone in a box or something at the front where they no longer have access to it the whole duration of their stay until they leave back out of the door. How would you address this issue if you see it as an issue? If you don't see it as an issue, could you explain why? If interested in changing this policy, what are the steps that you would do to change it?
Feel free to come off mute, use the chat. Love to hear from y'all.
Well, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So I'm calling because, I'm chiming in because we do actually have that as one of our policies here at Epworth. And this is actually not in our transitional living program, but it's in our shelter. So the reason for that particular rule is because we have other youth as well, like younger youth who are not allowed to use the phones, and we find that as long as there's a client that has a phone, there's always a way that the other youth gets to use the phone, whether they become buddy or the other client just allows them to use it. So in order to keep everything in order, the client has to turn their phone in and just use the phone on the unit while they're actually on the unit.
Thanks for sharing that with us. I think we use this scenario because it is super common scenario, but we know that this keeps young people oppressed. So I would ask you, like, if you were interested in changing that policy in your organization, what steps would you take to do so?
I think more so if we had older youth and younger youth apart, and that way we could monitor what's being done. I know I was actually over the transitional living program as well, and we did allow the clients to have their phones. Sometimes we had clients who use their phones appropriately, then we had other clients who would use it inappropriately, like they would FaceTime other people, show the other person. We used to have people with clients who would want to fight the other one, or had family members that maybe they got into an argument, so now they're showing this person to a family member. So I think we should just, as far as the shelter, just keep younger kids and older adults separate, and then just allow them to use their phones. But unfortunately, right now we have them housed together. We just try to keep them separate by rooms, but yeah, I would probably separate them and just allow them to use their phones when they want to.
Thanks for that. And I'm seeing a lot of stuff in the chat too, Deja.
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of great responses in the chat. I see Olivia says I might discuss the reasons for the policy with the House program manager if it isn't an issue of confidentiality or safety. I would explain the negative and isolating impacts of taking phones from youth, especially youth who are in transition. I love that. I see someone says, I see a Tracy says, I hope I say that right. If I didn't, I'm so sorry. We have previously had this policy in our shelter. However, we have lifted it since. We found the RHY need to have their phones to help keep their connections. So the policy was lifted. We now allow RHY to keep their phones, but they are not permitted to allow other youth to use their phones. They also have to turn their phones in at night when it's bedtime. That's nice. You allow them the access of their phones, but you also don't allow other people to access, and you kind of take it away from them at the nighttime. I love that. I see someone was coming off of mute. All right. If not, then I guess we're gonna go into our next one, and I'm gonna pass it over to Ari, and you can change the screen. Yeah, thanks.
We could just change that slide one more time. So sustaining equity is really important in this. It's really important that we create space for identifying and processing, releasing internalized racism, adultism, any type of phobia, transphobia, homophobia, all that, right? Because remember, we need intersectionality to do this kind of work. Also, it's really important to embrace discomfort and vulnerability. Create and maintain a racial equity team, and identify and the use of youth collaboration team and resources. And make sure we investigate how white dominant culture is present in the work, and have caucuses when needed, BIPOC caucuses, white caucuses, all that. Remember, a racial equity team really just like uses data inside. I want to go back to that. A racial equity team just uses data and things inside your programs to make sure that your trajectory of meeting your goals are on track or whatever, right? And using that data to lead professional developments, create learning workshops, and all that jazz. I'm going to actually turn it over to Deja for holding space for equity. Can we turn that slide? Thank you.
Hi, holding space for equity. It is helpful to establish equity goals early on in your efforts to create system changes at the local level. Creating equity goals is your first attempt to establish an equity baseline, but it is essential to your work line. It can look like ensuring we have a diverse group of stakeholders that represent the youth that we are serving, which normally looks like ensuring youth have the youth that we are working with have lived expertise, are a person of color, or part of the LGBTQ plus community, or disabled. Go ahead on to the next slide.
So these are some equity questions that you want to consider. What does racial equity, gender equity current look like for you in youth access and services in your organization, and policy and practice? These are questions for you all to take back and really chew on with young people in your organization and figure out, what do we need to do as an organization to really ensure that we're centering equity in all of the work that we're doing. And I think we're going to jump ahead because of time, if that's cool, Deja and Ari, to the slide, the Madison-Dane County Youth Action Board and Leadership, because this is most important. So I'm going to turn it over to you and Ari to talk about what you have done as youth leaders in Madison.
Yeah, I'll start us off real quickly. So we've actually built our YAB twice. We started a few years ago. It didn't go so well. So when COVID started, it all just disappeared. And sometime in COVID, somebody was like, we need to build this YAB again. We need youth voice. And so some social workers in our school districts came together and pulled youth who they asked if they were interested, and they said yeah. And we got our now new and improved YAB going. Now we are, we're a diverse group of young individuals who are making community connections and partnerships. And we're really working to like fight oppression, systems of oppression, adultism, racism, and ableism, transphobia, all that, right? And so we really center equity and intersectionality throughout our systems, and we advocate for the rights of young people and ensure that youth homelessness is rare, brief, and non-reoccurring in our communities.
We also these are just some of the things that we have accomplished as youth within the past like 2 years through COVID and everything. Like we mentioned earlier, we did stop our procurement process and restart a whole nother one just because we felt it wasn't where we wanted it to be at that moment. It is now up and running and doing really good. Which we'll probably talk about a little bit further if we have information. We also are now paid employees of Dane County. So we get taxes taken out our checks, baby. Which was a really big thing for us because last year we did have to pay taxes back. So us becoming employees was a really, really, really big step for us. And I think we're one of the first YABs to become employees. So it was a really big step for all the YABs in general. It kind of opened a whole portal that no one really knew what was there. Yeah, we've also spent about a ton of money on laptops recently. We all got our own laptops that we can now efficiently work on, which makes it so much easier and better for us to just create this amazing process that we are processing. And with that, we're going to move on to the next one.
We can actually skip this if we just want to like pause maybe and just give Deja and Ari, give you all the floor to just kind of share more about your experience and then open up for questions. So you can go back to that last slide. Cool. Is that cool with you all? Because I think we have like 3 minutes left, sorry.
Yeah. So yeah, so Tiff has brought some light to this already. We definitely still have, we talk about the positive things in our YAB. There are still some struggles that we are still fighting right now. Adultism is very present in our community, and how I use it in the terms of sometimes our older adult partners they have this belief that they are more superior, when in reality that we are just equals, right? We're all doing the work of trying to make sure that, again, homelessness is brief and rare. And to anyone who is like supporting a YAB in a YAB or knows about a YAB in their community, it is really important that, the YABs have YABs, I'm sorry, I keep saying this, youth action boards, have older adult partners who are very direct and very like, no, I'm not gonna take this for them, or, really stick up for the members in the YAB and also allow space for the YAB members to stick up for themselves. I know our society has deemed people who have pushed resistance as like our society deems people who push resistance as bad people. In reality, is just like, we have a belief and we stand by our beliefs and we want to try it out before you just cut it out, right? I have more, but I want to see if Deja wants to share anything.
Go ahead, Ari, you're on a roll.
Okay. Again, and also people who are starting YABs, remember your numbers will always start out really large. We had a very large number of YAB members, and it will always feel kind of shaky. It's really important that we remember that process of moving at the speed of equity and building relationships, because our YAB did shrink. People found out that they just couldn't, make that commitment. But our YAB may be small, our YAB is mighty and well educated in a sense. And when I say that, I mean like, we all have a way with words. I don't know.
Can I jump in really quick, Ari, and just say something?
Go
Yeah, so I think like the reason I'm really excited that Ari and Deja were able to share their brilliance with you all today is because they are leading examples of what it looks like when we really give the power back to young people to lead, to create change in their community. Like, they're doing so many radical things in Madison to end youth homelessness, and it's all being led by young people. And so when you really step up to the plate, and Rachel in the chat, she's another one of the YAB members in Dane County who's been a part of this. When we as older adult partners step back and really ensure that we're empowering young people and we're giving young people the ability to provide their wisdom and expertise into your policies, your procedures, your programs, things as simple as having a cell phone or not having a cell phone, all of those things return power back to young people. And that is how we're going to end youth homelessness, right? Is by having the experts leading the change and leading, and adults addressing their adultism. So I just wanted to like highlight them again, that you all are doing incredible work. And you're a prime example of what it looks like for young people to step into your power. So thank you for what you're doing for the world.
Thank you all for coming and listening to our presentation. We know it was quite long, but we hope you guys learned so much from it. We have dropped everything in the chat. We would love for you guys to complete the evaluation on the session. If you guys have any questions or comments, or you guys just want to talk to any of us, you're welcome to find us in the presenter portal, and you can send us a chat and we'll definitely respond to you guys. Again, thank you guys for coming.